Hello, everyone. I believe we have a few more people joining us. We'll give everyone just another second to join, but I do want to take a moment to greet, and I also want to double check that our audio is working. If we can get a few confirmations through the chat box that our audio is working, that would be great. And Max, if you can just say a quick hello as well, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, hi, everybody.
Good. I can hear you, so that's a good news. Okay, wonderful. It does look like people can hear us. So I think we're ready to get started here. So again, hello everyone. We are just so excited you can join us today. You are probably attending this webinar because you have a desire to create visual content, either for a blog post, a work project, or even a presentation. And maybe you've struggled with finding and collecting credible and compelling data to tell your story. Well, at Easelly, we recently spoke to Max Galka, an entrepreneur and blogger whose main focus is on the world of data. He is known as a data visualization genius as well as a data pioneer, working on projects that visualize information in truly colorful ways. I want to welcome Max and thank him in advance for joining us today. So Max, I think most people are pretty convinced about the power of visual content, and they are very interested in creating the content for their own needs and their own purposes. Whether they are a blogger, an entrepreneur, a marketer, or even a professor or teacher just trying to share their data and information in a visual and appealing way. So why do you think there is such an interest in the amount of data visualizations and infographics that we see today?
Well, I mean, I think it's just sort of a natural result of the amount of data that we have available. I mean, just the amount of data that's come online in the last 4 years, I don't have any stats on it, but it must be, 10 times as much as we had before. So with so much data, there just is much more of a need for being able to express it. I would say also that it wasn't until recently that the tools are really available to visualize that data well. So it's still a field that's growing and evolving, but yeah, just in the last few years, both the technology and the amount of information available has come a long, long way.
Well, that's great. And so let's actually start talking about maybe the differences between data visualizations and infographics. And I'm going to go ahead and minimize our video so that we can take a good look at our screens and have everyone follow along. So give me just one moment to do that. Okay, so I hope that everyone can still hear us clearly as I go ahead and expand my screen here. Okay, so Max, in your opinion, what is the difference between a data visualization versus an infographic?
Yeah, so this question comes up all the time. This causes confusion for most people. And the truth is that there's no real answer. There's no official definition of these terms. But usually when people say data visualization, they're referring to something very generic. It's just a graphic that represents numbers, data, statistics visually. So that could be a map, it could be a chart, it could be a scatter plot, it could be really anything. An infographic is typically something much more specific. So it's usually a static image that covers one specific topic. It has a range of different pieces of information about that topic from different aspects. Very often it will contain data visualizations. I mean, you can see here, some of the information is represented here as a data visualization, but it will often also contain text or images. Sometimes it'll have photos or cartoons. And it's usually kind of a standalone piece. You don't really need to read a blog post around it to understand what the infographic is about.
Okay, good. And Max, I'm just starting to get some confirmations that maybe the audio isn't maybe coming through. Can I get a confirmation from someone that maybe his audio is coming through? Okay, so it's just a few people that may not be getting audio, but it does appear that quite a few people are getting audio, so that's good. So for those who may not be hearing audio, I'm going to go ahead and send a message in the chat box just to let you know that you may need to just refresh your screen, or maybe you might need to rejoin the conference, but I just wanted to double check. But thank you for those who are confirming that you can hear Max. Okay, thank you for that response, Max. And just to let everyone know, this will be recorded as well. So if you aren't unable to hear the audio, we will certainly send a recording to everyone who has registered so that they'll be able to take a look at it after today's session. But we'll go ahead and keep going at this point. Okay, so there are so many different places people can go to collect data, and people do get a little overwhelmed at the idea of starting to collect that data. So what are some of your tips on getting started, and what are some of the suggestions that you have in terms of where people can go to locate data?
Well, I suppose the first question is probably depends on the reason you're looking for the data. Are you looking for something to make some kind of engaging content that people will share? Are you trying to answer questions that will help you grow your business? There's really a range of different purposes for data visualization, but yeah, I think it's important to know some of this, just the very core places you can go. I'd say most of the data that I get comes from probably just a few different sources. So,
Okay. Good. And what we'll do is let's talk a little bit more about some of these different places, and we'll walk through those together. Okay. So when we spoke with you recently, you had mentioned that public data was some of that data that you use on a regular basis
yeah.
and that you collect. Can you speak to that a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. So, when I mentioned that the amount of data available is growing, I'd say that's true more than anywhere in the world of public data, what people refer to as open data. So the biggest source of that is data.gov. I think they have close to 200,000 data sets now. It covers all federal government agencies. It's just tons and tons of information about just about any topic you can imagine. And that's usually my first stop when I'm looking for information about a particular topic. If there's something specific you're looking for that's not too obscure, if you search for it there's a good chance you'll find something. It's also good because it's organized by topic, and if you're not exactly sure what you're looking for, you can browse by topic and see what information is available. But that's just a great source. And I would say also that most states and most big cities also have their own data portal, which is very similar. So if what you're looking at is something on a more local level, the first place to stop I would suggest would be the city's public open data portal. And usually you can find it very easily just by searching, say, New York open data.
Okay, good.
The other one here is IPUMS. This one is not so well known, but I found this to be an enormously valuable resource. So some of you may have tried to work with census data in the past, and you may have gone to the census website and perhaps gotten a little bit confused about how to download the data, or couldn't quite find out where to go to download it or how to understand it once you did. IPUMS is run by the University of Michigan, and it's just a much cleaner, much easier to understand resource for getting that census data. So this is another one that I use all the time, even when I'm doing something that really has nothing to do with census data. The census is the best source of information for just your base information about population, demographics, income, employment, and that's the kind of information that fits into many different kinds of data analysis that have nothing to do with that topic in particular. So for anybody who wants to give it a look, this is IPUMS itself is something I think that could make its own presentation. There's so much to it. But if you go to that link there in the upper right corner, the NHGIS, that's probably the simplest, most straightforward way to get the information. And yeah, it's just a really great resource.
Great. Now, that is publicly available data, and it is definitely some external data that people can access. But, there's certainly some internal sources as well, just information and data that people are already collecting or they may have accessible, from maybe their website data about their customer base or people who are actually accessing their website. So, what about the website analytics? You had mentioned that could be a good source as well.
Yeah. I mean, this is another topic that you could go very, very far in depth into. I think this is something you could analyze for years and never reach the bottom of, because there's so many different ways of slicing and dicing the data. But it also doesn't have to be too complicated. I mean, I think there's some, if what you're looking to do is to understand your customers and how they're interacting on your website, there are some very simple metrics that you can download and that you can plot and get a much better understanding of what your audience is engaging with and what kind of content they that they like. So yeah, that's a great source. If you don't have Google Analytics installed, I think that it's certainly worth doing. I know some tools like Squarespace. If you have a website that's hosted by Medium, the analytics might be built in, but it's really very easy to set up, and it's just at a very high level without any kind of complex analysis of it. Can tell you a lot about your web traffic.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, people kind of forget about the data that's, just right underneath their nose and they have at their fingertips, and, ways that they can analyze that. And then, they may just have to go ahead and present that data to a stakeholder or, present it internally at to their stakeholders internally, other employees at their company. So this can be a great place.
Mm-hmm.
You had also mentioned that social media has kind of beefed up their dashboards and analytics. Talk to us a little bit more about that as a source for data.
Yeah, sure. So I think this is a very underrated one. I mean, you might immediately assume that information you get on social media, it could be helpful for growing your social profile or for driving traffic versus via social media. But I think actually it's valuable for much, much more than that. Social media is sort of the front line you have with your clients, your customers, and it can really tell you a lot about what your customers are interested in, who they are, what feedback they have about your content, and that really applies in general, not just to social media analytics, but to social media in general. That it's social media tells you a lot more, tells you information about a lot more than just about social media. But yeah, Twitter and Facebook have recently added a lot in terms of the analytics they provide, so you can really dig in and see how people are engaging with your content. And in my experience, that's probably the best way of seeing what content people are engaging with and what content they like. I mean, when you look at your website analytics, you can see what pages people are visiting, but you don't really have a great sense of what they think of it, whether it's something they're interested in or whether it's something that just had an interesting headline that sent them to the page and they left thinking that it wasn't that interesting. Social media, you can see when people are liking something or sharing something, that's a very strong signal of their impression of the content. So yeah, just like the website analytics, it's very easy to go into social media and pull up the analytics page they have there, and it makes it very easy to you can just go there and it'll give you all the information you need.
Yeah, and for someone who's maybe that social media specialist at a company and is pulling that data and just needs to be able to present that information in a visual and engaging way to the sales department or the CEO at a company, being able to pull that data and then being able to showcase that in an infographic, can be very, very valuable and engaging and get straight to the point. So I think this was a very good suggestion. Okay. So we also wanted to point out that, things like audience polls and surveys and your own sales data can be very, very valuable. And, we're talking a lot about ways that you can use it as a small business owner or if you're a marketer. But, we have a strong customer base with our K-12 teachers, media specialists, and you can go ahead and poll your students and surveys on whatever the topic is, and then just go ahead and present that data to your class in an infographic. So there are many different ways to go ahead and collect that data, whether it's a Google form, SurveyMonkey, Survey Gizmo, Qualtrics. If you are at a larger company that might use something a little bit more advanced, but you'll see that there are various ways to be able to go ahead and pull that data. Do you have any thoughts on this, Max?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is something that I use quite frequently. It's very inexpensive, and at least the way I use it is usually to get some initial feedback on some sort of business decision, whether it's trying to gauge how people are going to react to a different, whether people understand, say, the user interface. So you might do an A/B test and show two user interfaces and see which one people prefer, or whether people would be interested in some sort of feature that allows them to do X, Y, Z. I think a survey itself doesn't ever give you the final word, but it's usually a very quick, very easy, cheap way of getting that initial round of feedback that can tell you, where to look deeper after that.
Yeah, and people who are willing to respond, usually, they have very strong opinions, and while it may not be the be-all, end-all, it's definitely a good place to get started in terms of things to consider.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, lastly, I did want to, of course, always point out that federal, state, and public libraries are the most amazing place to go for data. And of course, we can't specifically point out specific items because they have access to so many different databases that they subscribe to, and they will build out their collections based off of the patrons that they see coming in and their community needs. And I didn't even list academic libraries and K-12 libraries who also have collections and databases with a wealth of data. So always check there. And what's great is that they also have a library staff that can guide you to the databases that might give you some more information. Now, Max, you had mentioned that you frequent New York Public Library's databases quite a bit.
Yeah, but they're doing some really incredible work. They have a lot of this isn't data in the traditional sense. A lot of it is old maps and old records and old photographs that they have, which are really just fascinating to go through, and have been helpful for me in a lot of different analysis that I've ran. But yeah, I mean, they have data on all sorts of different topics. Most recently, I was on their site. They have done a lot of work taking old real estate records and digitalizing them, so you can see information about buildings going back 100, 200 years. So yeah, I mean, I've been very impressed with what New York Public Library has been able to do. I'm not as familiar with libraries in other parts of the country, but the Library of Congress website at the federal level is also very impressive. Each time I check back on the site, it seems like they have more and more information, and yeah, just a lot of really interesting old historical records that you really can't find anywhere else.
Yeah, and sometimes they can help give you that context that you need behind the data. Max, you use a lot of data that is being collected over time, and sometimes being able to do some research in some of these databases to get that context behind it to help capture that story can certainly be helpful, I would imagine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so those are just a few places to start if you're looking to go ahead and collect data. And, Max and I have been talking quite a bit, and I just wanted to go ahead and quickly check to see if there are any questions coming in. We do have just quite a few people that are just saying hello, of course. So again, thank you for attending today's session. I don't see any immediate questions coming through at this point in time, but if you do have any questions, I will check the chat window at the very end of today's session. We're, of course, trying to cover everything in about a 30-minute period. We know we're all busy, so we still have about 10 minutes to discuss a few more things. But we talked about polls earlier as a way to be able to collect data. And I did want to remind everyone that we did go ahead and create a poll for this webinar ourselves. And if you take a look at the main window and you scroll just below the window, you'll see that there is a button for Q&A as well as polls. You'll see if you click on polls that I have created a poll because, I wanted to see who was in the audience today. So based off of the information and people's responses to the polls so far, it does look like we have quite a few teachers and educators and media specialists on the call today. And now as I'm responding or letting you know about this right now, I do see a few more people responding, so that is wonderful. We also have a few professionals, whether they're in business or marketing or sales, as well as some entrepreneurs and small business owners. We have a couple nonprofits, an individual in higher ed, and one listed as other. So thank you so much for taking the time to respond to that. That helps me in terms of developing webinars in the future and determining who my audience is and the type of information that you want to hear about. We also wanted to get a better understanding as to whether or not you're familiar with Easelly and if you've used it before or if you've never heard of it. So it does look like we have quite a few people that have used it before and are looking to use it more. So thank you so much for your responses. It's really great to see. Okay, so Max, let's go back to some tips for data analysis. Mm-hmm. What are some tips that you have? Now, I know that quite a few people might be a little overwhelmed with some of the big data that's out there, but based off of just the few things that we spoke of today and in terms of getting started, what are some tips that you might have?
Yeah, sure. So I get this first point here is regarding making sure that the data you're working with is reliable. I think people often maybe spend a little bit too much time double checking that. I mean, not that it's not important to be working off reliable data, but very often there's only so much you can do to vet that the data you're working with is correct. I think more important than that is making sure that you're getting it from a reliable source and that you're properly attributing it so that people know where you're getting it from, which not only allows people to go check it, but also just makes it look more credible and gives people a better idea of exactly what they're looking at. So, if you're getting information from, say, the Bureau of Labor Statistics and something in there turns out to be incorrect, you should always use some sort of common sense overview just to make sure to look for those kind of things. But there's really only so much you can do about that. So, I think more important than checking the data is just to make sure you're getting it from somewhere reliable and to say where you're getting it from. I would also say that more important than checking the data itself, most of the errors that I see in analysis online comes from the interpretation of the analysis. And I know it's a cliche, the correlation does not imply causation, but this just comes up so much in so many different ways. I think just most recently in, I don't want to get too political here, but in the election, I think when people are talking about some of these the polls and how far they were off, I think there's a good argument that it was less the polls that were off and more the conclusions that were drawn from them and drawn by very intelligent people. So it's really sort of a very difficult area of data analysis to try to understand what the conclusions mean. Usually much safer is to show the relationships just as they are and let the data speak for itself and let people draw their own conclusions. Of course, you can talk about what you think it means and what the different possible conclusions are, but I think it's always important to make sure that you disclaim everything you say that really all you're showing with the data is the relationship, not necessarily what the relationship means.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really kind of like your last suggestion here in terms of let the data speak for itself. Sometimes there's so many different ways that you can take a look at data and analyze it, and kind of people can get hung up on what does it really mean, and there may not be a right or wrong answer, but it's just a matter of understanding what's there and and what you're actually looking at. So I'm not sure if you have any other thoughts on that.
Yeah, I do. I think that very often people, when they look at a graphic, they're looking for some sort of big conclusion or some sort of the graphic to be making some sort of argument. I think sometimes it's sometimes just more interesting just to see the data. I don't think a graphic necessarily has to be making some sort of point about something. I think very often just understanding more about what you're looking at is useful in and of itself.
Yeah, and I kind of noticed that, from the data visualizations on your website, Metricosm, and you do provide some context, of course, but you can just go ahead and take a look at some of those data visualizations and just learn from them. And you're not necessarily explaining too much, but it definitely allows you to get a better understanding of something. Whether or not someone chooses to analyze it further or draw some larger conclusions, that's different. But like you said, just it's very interesting to take a look at. Now, you have some suggestions, of course, for some additional data visualization tools that might be a little bit more advanced,
Sure.
and some learning resources. I do provide a link on this slide deck, and we'll be providing a link to this deck as well in a follow-up email to everyone who has registered. But do you have any, someone did ask, what are some data visualization tools out there, some that are free and some that are paid. Do you have any suggestions so that we can maybe address that question that came through?
Yeah, sure. So there's really a big range of different tools depending on what it is you're trying to do and what your experience is with technical tools. So I would say that sort of what people call the Swiss Army knife of data visualization is coding in JavaScript with what's a library called D3. So that's quite advanced. If you don't have experience coding, that's probably not the place to start. But if data visualization is something you really want to invest some time in and really understand, D3 is really sort of the number one tool that people use. It's when you look at the data visualizations on the New York Times or in the FT, or most of those are done using D3. So that is kind of the premier data visualization tool for people who want to spend the time learning how to code. I think Easelly is an outstanding tool, and it's something that I recommend to a lot of people. It's very easy to use. It allows you to not only create the visualization component, but to create all the visuals around it, just to make it aesthetically very nice looking. So I think that's a great tool to start with. I do a lot in Excel. A lot of people really don't like Excel, and I think it doesn't get that much respect. But I think in terms of its charting and graphing functionality, it's actually a really powerful tool. You can't do anything super complex, but if what you're looking to make is a specific type of chart, such as a bar chart or a scatter plot or pie chart, it really gives you a wide range of ways of customizing the look of it and how it's shown. And I use Excel all the time for graphics that I make. Another great tool for maps in particular, or actually two great tools, are Mapbox and Carto. So Mapbox and Carto, they are paid tools if you're using them to beyond some threshold. And I think that Mapbox, the threshold has to do with the number of views that your map gets, which is some extremely large number that only applies to very large websites. And I think Carto, it has to do with the amount of data that you upload. So if you're creating, say, 20 different maps, at some point you're going to have to start paying. But if what you're doing is, if you're just creating these data visualizations casually and not something that you're doing on an ongoing basis, both these tools are free and they're very easy to use. The maps look great, and I think are really great tools to look at. So those tools again are called Mapbox and Mapbox.com and Carto.com.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for those suggestions. I know that, a lot of our individuals in our community, Easelly community, are people who are looking for easy ways to get started, of course, but I do know that we do have some advanced users out there, so I know that they appreciate those suggestions. Okay, so let me go ahead and just go ahead and go to our next slide here, because you actually have a visualization tool that will be releasing soon. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, yeah, that's right. So this tool is focused on the area of maps. It's meant to be very easy to use. It does map sort of like some of the ones that I do on my website on Metrocosm. Really, my view is that maps are just such a great expressive tool for communicating information. And you do have tools like the two I just mentioned, Mapbox and Carto, which are outstanding tools, but they only allow you to do things up to a certain degree. They're great for plotting points to show the location of things. They're great for different using color as a way of conveying information. But there are so many other great things you can do with maps that right now is really only possible if you're willing to actually write the code yourself. So BlueShift is a tool that allows you to take your data and visualize it on a map. And as you can see, this one here, these are just some examples of maps that have a time component to them, where you have pieces that are moving around or changing over time. You can also do some really interesting stuff in 3 dimensions. You can show information on a 3D globe. You can have parts of the map that pop out of the page. So yeah, BlueShift is a tool that I'm building to make this very easy to do, so that you don't need to be a coder to do it. You can just upload the data and show the data how you want using the online tool. So it's not quite finished yet, but it will be launching soon. I anticipate in another week or so I will be launching it in private beta. So if you'd like to give it a try, I'd love to hear what you think. It's entirely free. If you want to learn more, you can go to blueshift.io, and if it seems interesting, you can sign up for the private beta there.
Great. And, the ones that I have reflecting here are just examples of the video and the data that's been uploaded in that way. On your website, Metrocosm, you actually have a few examples where people can actually engage with the data and, move the images in 3D format around and look at it in different ways. So definitely go ahead and check that out on his website, and you'll be able to see some more examples of that. Okay, good. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. And of course, with all of this information that you're gathering, certainly don't forget about us at Easelly. With all that data and information that you find, you can create infographics by creating an account on Easelly at no cost. Of course, you'll gain access to additional objects and templates if you go pro for only $3 a month. So certainly go ahead and consider that. We are providing a 14-day free trial to those who are attending today's webinar session. If you take a look at the green button at the very bottom of our screen, you'll be able to click on that and you'll be able to gain access to that free trial. Now, I wanted to maybe address some of the other questions that are coming through our Q&A list, Max, but I know that some people may have only dedicated about 30 minutes for today's webinar session. So for those people that might start to drop off the line because they have to go to their next meeting or their next class, I do want to thank you for your time, and we'll stick around here with Max for just a few more minutes to address some other questions that are coming through. And what I'll do is at this point, I'll also start to put up our contact information. So if you'd like to follow Max, you can certainly follow him on Facebook and Twitter. You can also visit his website, metricosm.com. You can go to Blue Shift and sign up for early access. And then he also has some other projects. You can visit foyamapper.com as another way to take a look and access data. And, continue to follow us on Easelly on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and some other social media platforms out there. But we do have a few postings where we have, of course, interviewed Max, and so you can get some more detail on some of his tips and suggestions on collecting data. And again, don't forget about that trial. So Max, let's go ahead and take a look at some additional questions that might be coming through, if that's okay.
Sure. So let's see.
Okay, and I'm sure that you might be able to view some of them. If not, I can ask them to you, or if you want to, here's one.
Yeah, sure, yeah. I can see the questions.
Okay.
So when there's been research done, how does the process go deciding which data to use and which not between the researcher and designer of an infographic? So, in my case, I'm usually the researcher and the designer. And I guess that for me, this question really sort of comes down to the purpose of what I'm trying to figure out. I think just as a general matter, when it comes to creating data visualizations, I think there might be a little bit too much focus on the side of how do I create these visualizations rather than on the side of stepping back and saying, why am I making this visualization? What is the purpose? What am I trying to accomplish? So I think if, for example, you're making an infographic, that's something that you think you want your audience to enjoy and possibly share around on social media. I think that's how you should be evaluating the data you're looking at. If it's something you think people will find interesting, I think that's really what should determine whether you show it or not. If what you're looking for is to find out some information about your customers and to understand better who they are, what they're interested in, well, then I think that it's really a different criteria you're using to decide what data to visualize. I think in that case, the visualization serves as more of an exploratory tool for making sense of the information, in which case I would say that the information to visualize is the information that you're having a hard time understanding and where you think there might be some patterns that you could find. So yeah, I suppose the generic answer to that question is I think the first thing is to step back and ask what it is you're trying to accomplish and look over the data from that perspective.
Yeah, that's definitely some good suggestions. Again, I think that goes back to people kind of getting hung up on, gathering all this data and then, thinking that they want to use it all, but then you kind of have to kind of step back and, really assess, what you want your audience to know, come away with, what's the story that you're looking to tell. So absolutely great suggestions. It looks like there's just one more question there at the very end. And if it's in regards to collecting data that is used in a survey for a doctoral study. And it looks like this individual has a pro account with Easelly, I assume. So you can certainly go ahead and create graphs and charts with our pro account. And you can, of course, input the data yourself through the graphs and charts. And you can also upload data from an Excel spreadsheet, a Google Sheet, a CSV file. So you can certainly go ahead and do that. So, I don't know if you have any suggestions, Max, on, presenting data from a doctoral study, but I know that in an infographic using Easelly, you can certainly go ahead and do that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I didn't mention this as a resource during the talk here, but a lot of the information I get comes from academic studies. I think that's a really interesting place to look for information that may be very, very interesting, but not presented in a way that people who are not experts understand. So yeah, I mean, I think academia is a great place to look for information. I don't have any more particular information about this particular study, but as a general matter, yeah, I think that's a great place to go looking for data.
Yeah, absolutely. Because oftentimes people just kind of want to push out that data, or it might be embedded in a very lengthy report. But if you're just trying to provide an overview of your survey data from that doctoral study, then absolutely, it's an infographic or some type of visual representation of that data could be very valuable.
Sure.
Well, Max, I think that might be all of the questions that we're getting, other than someone wanting to know what your Twitter handle is. And so I don't know if you'd like to go ahead and point out your Twitter handle. I can type it into the chat window as well, and we can add it as a comment. But if you'd like to give that out to everyone.
That looks like Arlen's got it here. It's Galka_Max.
Galka_Max. Thank you. So, look at that. Okay, great.
Yeah. I'm very active on Twitter, and I'm also I try to be very responsive. So, I'm always glad for people to reach out, to connect with me, and to hear the kind of different projects they're working on. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do see that you do have quite a few followers. So I hope that you may have gained a few more today. So thank you so much, Max, for taking the time to work with us here at Easelly. And, again, we will be pushing out the blog posts that we have where you discuss this topic in greater length. And of course, we'll push out a recording to everyone who's registered here today, along with the links to some other resources. But again, feel free to reach out to us here at Easelly or Max, and we'll be happy to connect with you. So thank you so much, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Max.